Hello and welcome back to another episode of Soccer Supernova with me, Amy Canavan, the show where I chat to some of the most interesting guests in the world of football. Today's guest is certainly none other than that. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the current QPR manager and former Brentford, Rangers and Nottingham Forest man, Mark Warburton. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. How are you?
Amy, very well, thank you. Nice to talk to you.
Thanks so much for joining us today. So let's just get right into it. How did the football career start about? It's we'll talk about the managerial, but what was the playing days like for you?
Oh, playing days. I was a kid that loved football. There's many millions of the same ilk, and lucky enough to play sort of district and county and go from there. And then I got a contract with Leicester City with Frank McClintock, and I had a couple of years up at Leicester City. I came across Jock Wallace. It's a small world. Football's a real village, and Jock was the manager there. And who would have thought? Several years later, I mean, his office in Ibrox, the training ground, etc. So that was that. I didn't have a good time. I didn't enjoy that side of it. Very different styles and beliefs. I went into conference. I was a bang average conference player, Amy, no more than that. But at the time, the competitive fix came from the city as well. So I was combining, building a career in the financial markets and still playing, twice a week as well. So a good time, and then you move on from there.
That is, like you say, it's full circle, sorry. What was Jock Wallace like?
I've got to say it's the right way, because he's at quite rightly legendary status at Rangers, a magnificent manager, so successful. But he was what you'd call now, I suppose, old school. He was an ex-Marine and strong, and, he had his ways, which for me, I came out of lucky to have a good schooling. I came out with some really good teachers, and this was like, completely different world for me. And you can say the old sayings, it makes a man of you and stuff. For me, I just thought myself, I would never enjoy learning and coaching this way. And at a young age, at 17, I'm thinking to myself, no, this is not for me. And to take enjoyment away from the sport you've loved all your life, I'm saying something by that. But I really lost it. And as I say, I enjoyed the conference side. We were semi-professional with good club Enfield. We won what is the conference title and the FA Trophy. We had good success, and I really got my love of the game back. But it's incredible how different styles can clash and really put you off something quickly. And I still saw, a good result last night, and one of the players, Paul Ramsey, who played 400 games for Leicester, called me last night and well done, etc. So I keep in touch with the guys and made some great friends, but I found the actual coaching environment completely the opposite of what I would see for myself as being a positive environment to move forward in the game.
So you talk about, obviously, prior to Leicester, it was the career of your dreams. Football is what you love. How hard was it then to leave behind football and go on to a real job, really?
Well, it was a real job, but I was very lucky. I had great teachers at school. I love sport. I loved all sports. Very lucky to be decent at running and different sports. So my time was taken up combining the academic and the sporting side. So I was used to early starts, late finishes. That was no problem. And then the financial markets, as bizarre as it sounds to people outside, was a really competitive environment. The FX markets, the currency traders, I had a fantastic 24, 25 years in there and really sort of developed a career in that market. Great at the start, Amy, to combine it with conference football, and you're training 3 times a week, playing twice a week, and it was a nice wage on top as well. You're single at the time. I went to Charlotte, North Carolina with the bank and playing over there in the American side of it and coaching as well. So I was very, very fortunate. But as a soccer career died down, the financial side of it really took off. I was very lucky to have some good jobs, make good progress. So I had a really competitive edge from that market as well.
What's the responsibilities like in that sort of role?
This is, again, it sounds absurd when you're outside of it. It sounds absurd to think you've got fairly young guys having this much responsibility. But, by the end of it, by the time, say, you get to sort of like 1996, 98 onwards from there, my desk, we would turn over 20 billion a day. You do 2 billion a day yourself, no problem at all in a day. And, you're looking at making millions over the course of a year and losing it in 1 hour. It was a really high pressure, stress environment, but so similar to dressing room. I had 10, 12, 15. At that time, it was male dominated. Obviously changed a lot, thankfully, now, but it's male dominated. So a testosterone filled competitive environment where if you did well, you were well rewarded. If you didn't hit your targets, you lost your job. And I love that black and white nature, Amy. I love that fact you knew what you had to do, where you stood. And I was very structured in my thinking. So, if your budget, for example, was to make $10 million a year, you say, right, that's 250 a week over 10 months. You know, 50 grand a day, and you could go bang. But that was how I thought. Others would do it very differently. But I had a very methodical approach to it. But I loved it. I loved the environment. I was lucky to work and live in Charlotte, North Carolina, live in Chicago, you know, spend time in New York, Asia, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore. I was very, very fortunate. And thankfully, I'd found a career, Amy, that I was okay at. You know, I was decent at what I did, got a good reputation, and you know, got well looked after as well.
So you touched on it. So when you're out in America still, you're coaching?
Yeah. I started coaching for the first time, and going back to Jock Wallace, and this sounds very profound for a young guy. I'm not some sort of geek, far from it. But I knew that the most important thing in coaching was for the participants to enjoy it. So I was literally over the park in Charlotte, and then they said, would you coach the bank team? And then would you coach the high school team? And would you take the girls under 9 team and then the boys under 11s team? And suddenly I found myself playing and coaching, you know, going into the pro level. And then I went to UNC, Chapel Hill in Durham, North Carolina, and you're sort of like talking to coaches there, and you're doing the college teams, and I really enjoyed it. I loved that side of it, and all I concentrated on was, you know, did they enjoy it? Go through the technical aspects of passing practice in my own mind, and this carried on in Chicago in '96, '98 as well. I mean, and again, my ignorance, I had no idea that a coaching badge even existed. When I came back and someone asked me, "What badge have you got?" I have no idea what you're talking about. But that was just, as I say, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. I came back and very quickly after 2000 got my coaching badges. That's my A license, and changed my career from there. That's much further down the line. But I was lucky to be working in a competitive environment, and a job I really did enjoy. I loved it, and at the same time get some coaching and footballing as well.
So because you were in that competitive environment that sort of mirrors the dressing room, is that where you sort of realised I want to get back into football, and obviously you're coaching on the side as well?
Yeah, it is, and also the passion for sport never goes away, Amy. So I had 2 children. My youngest was my son, and at 9 he was asked to go into like Arsenal and Watford Academy. I'm talking to a coach there. You know, what's your background? I used to play, and in short, they had no money. They were very, very tight in the finances. Would you look to come and help the under 13 or the under 10 coach, whatever it may be? So I was doing a job. You know, I was getting the office. I'd leave home and I get the 5:12 train in the morning every day. I get the office by 5:45. You know, you're working through until 6, 7, 7:30. But this on 2 days a week now, I was asked to get away at 4:30 to go and coach as an under 13, and loved it. And that's when the blue touch paper was relit, so to speak, to really enjoy the game that we all love. And I really engrossed myself in that and involved myself in it, and get my badges done, the B license, I'm producing my A license. And I found myself, Amy, on a course with the likes of Ray Wilkins, Dean Saunders, Chris Coleman, Clayton Blackmore, you know, Simon Doe, Adrian Heath, these type of, you know, household names. I'm thinking I'm working at RBS on a trading desk. And here I am with, you know, Ray Wilkins sadly passed away now, but what a player, what a gentleman, you know, and to spend 2 weeks twice a year with him was a real privilege. So, you know, suddenly that bug is now really taken off, and I had to find a way. I knew then that I had to change career. The hard thing was, A, what route to take, and B, telling the wife as well.
Absolutely. It's absolutely. How is it when you're going through your badges then, and like you say, you're turning around and there's Ray Wilkins and Dean Saunders, did you feel like you were almost an outsider because you weren't that player going into the coaching, or was it not really an issue?
Yeah, this sounds a bit bizarre, but when you're talking to people, you haven't got their background, obviously. When you talk about England internationals and Welsh internationals and Liverpool and Chelsea and Clayton Blackmore at Man United and Adrian Heath at Everton and all these various people. But also my selling point, my USP, so to speak, was the financial markets. Because same as players, they were fascinated by what went on in the trading market, because they love money, not in an obnoxious way. Holidays, lifestyle, etc. They're well-paid football players. But I had my side, you know, and I'm talking about people very similarly rewarded in what I was doing. So they loved that. So you had something to converse with and talk about and share. So it sounded not in an obnoxious, arrogant way, far from it. It was just a talking point of conversation, Amy, and it allowed me to get to know them really well. And Ray was actually my partner. You paired up for your coaching exercises. So a real privilege for me to have time spent with such a gentleman, you know, such a top-class legendary player, but a good conversation with him about my background and obviously with his as well.
Absolutely. So then you're at Watford, obviously your son is as well. So what's your role within a Watford? Is it just academy based? Is it youngsters?
I was academy based, Amy, and right the way through, I knew that I was offered a full-time job, and I knew I had to have a deeper education. I couldn't go in. I was very senior in what I did previously in the city. I couldn't go into coaching, Amy, and just be a bang average coach with a very sketchy knowledge. So I spent a year going around Europe, and I literally used my banking skills. I cold called so many clubs. I got pied by every single club until one guy at Sporting Lisbon, who's now a dear friend, a guy called Diogo Matos, invited me over to Sporting. I said, if you can get over, we have a golf day, come and play golf. And you have 5 hours with me, which is great on a golf course.
Absolutely.
That turned into spending a week with him and then come back and spend another week with him. And, you know, this is a guy in the club that produced the likes of Figo and Quaresma and Ronaldo and these guys. So very, very lucky to see there. And I learned then, and of course, he can phone up his mate at PSV and Ajax. I spent weeks with them, and he phoned up the mate at Barcelona. So I was spending time at Barcelona at La Masia. And all these contacts later down the line, Amy, led to what was a tournament called the NextGen series for 24 of the biggest clubs in Europe under 19 level. And that really was a very serious tournament. So those contacts were really fruitful for me. But when I went back to Watford, I had a far deeper education of how young players learn, how they need to be trained, you know, growth spurts, etc. All these various aspects to youth development that I had not gone around Europe, Amy. I would have had a hole in my education, which would certainly have hurt me going forward. So I was really pleased to do that. Lucky I could financially do that. You spend a lot of money flying everywhere and hotels, and an understanding wife and family that knew that I wanted something different. And I was very lucky to have been looked after in my previous job. I had some financial resources behind me, and I could go and really throw myself into the new role. And when I went back full-time at Watford, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Eddie Boothroyd was a manager. I had a great relationship with him and still a huge respect for him as a person, a coach, etc. The likes of Malcolm Mackay. Sean Dyche was my youth team coach in the academy as we got on, and you know, great friend. People, and Brendan Rodgers came in as well. Dick Bate, who again who's sadly passed, but the best coach educator in the world by none. So I was really privy to a fantastic learning curve, Amy. I was so fortunate, so lucky, but I could contribute through my city experiences. So I would present to the players and the staff about a life in the city trader, what they do and how it works. And so I was able to give back as opposed to take, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something in there that it's almost like learning your trade going out to Europe. Do you think that's something that maybe, you know, players that go straight into that transition into coaching, that's maybe a gap in their knowledge? Like you say, you just think because I played the game, I can then go and do it. So you took that step back and really realised I have that gap. Do you think there's maybe an issue amongst players that they can't really see that they maybe have that gap in their knowledge?
Potentially, but don't forget, they're playing when I was working in the bank. They're getting access to great coaches, you know, and learning from those coaches. So they have a different route of their education. Does it help to go abroad and learn? Absolutely. You know, I'm sure that would benefit. But don't forget, the likes of Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, Wayne Rooney, these guys have played under the very best managers in the world and will have picked up enormous tips and ideas all along the way. So, yes, maybe. You can't do any harm, put it that way. But I was in a different position.
So you spoke about, obviously, it's the academy at Watford. And like you say, there was such a plethora of great coaches there at the time, like Sean Dyche, Brendan Rodgers, to name but a few. So sort of drawn back to now current times and what we're going to see through COVID and through Brexit as well with transfers, do you think there needs to be more funds put into academies across the country?
I think you've seen with the EPP down here, you've seen academies really excel in recent years. You know, there's some outstanding work being done by the academies at various clubs up and down the country. There's some really talented players. Look at the squads that are available. Obviously, I'm saying England but the four nations. Look at the quality of players that are coming through. You know, I'm looking at Rangers with young Billy Gilmore, for example, went down to Chelsea, and here's an outstanding player with such a bright future ahead of him, but one of many, many talents. And then you look at the guys who've come through, the Mason Mounts and the Madisons, and all of these guys who are now, you know, established internationals, still very young players. But it proves the academies are doing some outstanding work. But with the Brexit rules, the homegrown, the domestic players who can impact games are going to be so valuable and eagerly sought after.
So when you're at Watford, was the aim then always to become a first team manager? Maybe not necessarily of Watford, but was the aim to progress and, like you say, move up to that first team role?
No, that's a great question. Absolutely 100% not.
No.
No, because I tell you why, being honest, I thought that with my lack of playing background, I was a bang average conference player, Amy. So I'm never playing out in the Premier League or Championship. And I'm thinking, I haven't got the career that would enable me to go into a first team environment. I always thought to myself I was going to be in the youth. What I did realise was that you had to be at one of the big clubs to have any influence, to make an impact, to be able to be responsible for positive change. You had to be at the right club with the right clout. So I knew that. So I wanted to try and get that move to, be it to Tottenham, or Chelsea, Man U, Liverpool, that type of club. That was always going to be my aim. And then I was very fortunate that through various contacts, I met Matthew Benham, the owner of Brentford now, who's done such magnificent work for the club. And I had a fallout with a guy at Watford, and he asked me to come in and coach the first team at Brentford, where they'd moved the manager on. So I came in for 6 months, and that was it. And all I did was apply the same principles. Are the players going to enjoy it? Is it structured? Is it relevant, etc.? And went from there. So suddenly I find myself, Amy, in the first team world, and thoroughly enjoyed it. But I never for 1 second thought I'd have access to it.
What were the nerves like when you get that call from Matthew that, like you say, you're going to be in charge of the first team?
You know what I was nervous about, to tell you the truth, was the names of the players. So literally, he phoned me about 1 in the morning, and I spent from 1:15 to 6:15 on go trying to remember all the names of the players. I thought it was really important to turn up and know that. Then I thought, what about the session? What am I going to do? And I realised Nicky Forster was a player, but he had never taken a session in his life. So he was sort of like the figurehead. And I was a guy who came to the coaching, but I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Really enjoyed it. I loved the fact that it was so competitive. And the dressing room, for me, my background in the city really held me in good stead. And you could hear the guys, who's this guy coming along here? And they start talking to you, and then you present and you drop it in at the right time, and they realise there's something to talk about. You have that point of conversation. Got on great with that. Then I wanted the job full time, and Matthew appointed Uwe Rosler to come in and made me director of football. At the time, it's well documented, I was quite angry. I wanted that job, but it was a great move for me. It was a great learning curve to deal with the agents and the contracts to hire the staff. But the key for me, Amy, is always the environment. Get the environment right, whereby it's conducive to people learning. People enjoy coming to work, how you talk to people, level of respect. I don't want to sound like an old dinosaur, but it's so important to get that environment right. So that role really allowed me to thrive in that, to really create it, get good staff. I'm really proud of the fact that many of the Brentford staff are still there. Head of medical, the kit man, the sports scientist, and Kevin O'Connor's an outstanding individual and coach. These type of people are still there doing a magnificent job. So I'm really proud of that. And then, of course, when Uwe went to Wigan, I was offered a job by Matthew, and from there, the rest you know.
Absolutely. So just going back to that, like, sport and director role, obviously, director of football is a subject that's talked about so much now, and that it's becoming so prominent, and all the top clubs should sort of have it. What exactly was your role? Obviously, you're talking about the agents, but do you just agree with the manager, or are you there to offer that sort of, no, I'm not having it?
No, I think it's a very, very good question, and a very deep question, because you've got to have, I think the manager has got to believe and trust you 100%. He has to know you've got his back when you go into a board meeting or a difficult meeting with the owner after a bad result or bad run of performances. He has to know you have his back. And I can honestly tell you that every day with Uwe, he knew that was the case. Details. His environment is a pitch. My environment was recruitment. And I was in charge of the first team in the academy. So, there's a lot to concentrate on the various departments: medical, analytical, sports science, coach, all these various departments you're responsible for. There's a lot of work, but I made sure, Amy, although as much as I wanted to put a tracksuit on and go near the pitch, I didn't do that. I made sure that was his world, and I didn't encroach on that. We would have coffee every day. You have dinner, every other week, and we'd talk 10 times a day. I think when he got the job, it's a true story. I think Uwe averaged something like 140 odd phone calls a day to me in Florida, and my wife was absolutely spitting blood, as you can imagine. But he was so keen in the job. And what player? What about this? I'll call you back. Call me straight back again. What about this player? And it was his enthusiasm, which I loved, but he knew that I was there for him as well. So, it was short-term pain for long-term gain in terms of the holiday. But that's the key. Have his back. Give him honest opinion. Don't be a yes man. Any manager that wants to go to football is a yes man. is completely incorrect. You have to have someone who gives honest opinion in a respectful way. I never encroached. I tell him what I thought. He said to me, "What team would you play?" "I'd play this one," and why. But it was his call. I never ever encroached on that. And if you can keep those boundaries clear and never become blurred, I think you have a really good relationship. It's a vital role for any club now.
That is a fine line, and you touched upon it before as well, and I just want to come back to it. You spoke about the NextGen series that you were a part of, and I think that's when you were at Brentford. What was and what is almost the importance of that cross-border sort of competition? Do you see it as a way forward for the elite clubs in Britain?
Well, what it was, to be honest with you, when I was going around Europe, there was a consistent message. Everyone said to me, but bearing in mind, I mean, I'm seeing the academy people, academy directors and reserve coaches, youth team coaches. Everyone said the transition from elite youth performer to regular first team player was too difficult. You know, the first team level was up here and they couldn't replicate that and get enough boys through. And I was hearing it at Sporting, I was hearing it at PSV, I was hearing it at Ajax. You know, Barca obviously had Barca B and Secunda, etc. But still, how do you get players in the first team? So when I phoned round, and Matthew who funded it and was a fantastic supporter, we said, well, how, you know, what about an elite competition? And everyone said yes. We had 16 clubs in year one. We had the likes of Liverpool, and I think Liverpool played Sporting at Anfield in the first game at home. It was obviously two-legged. And I kid you not, when Liverpool team contained John Joe Shelby, Raheem Sterling, Connor Cody, Andre Wisdom, Suso, you know, Morgan, you name it. These guys are top class players now in the Premier League internationals. Got beat 8-1 on aggregate by Sporting Lisbon. Wow. And that tells you the level. So they realised, and I'm sure, you know, the feedback was so positive. Man City getting, you know, humbled by Barcelona, but it was a best lesson because that was the level of elite players in Europe. And suddenly you had players who had to win. You know, some of the youth games don't really matter. This time you had, I mean, you know, Spurs, a club close to my heart. They had to go to Milan and get a point. This type of situation, this type of challenge, Amy, was what the boys needed to then accelerate their learning to the first team. So we had 16 in the first year. We had 24 in the second year, like Borussia Dortmund, PSG, Anderlecht. You know, these type of teams. You know, we had everyone was there, and we had another 40-odd teams trying to get in. And then, unfortunately, UEFA, who invited us over to Neon, took it over and created the UEFA Youth League, which was basically NextGen. Absolutely.
So, as we've said, then you do eventually get, touching back to Brentford, you get that first team role and you do become manager. What's the buzz like then?
Yeah, it's fantastic because you're actually doing a job. You see about a football manager. I've got to tell you, the first time you stand on the touchline, I'm sure any other manager or coach would agree. When you stand on the touchline, you are so exposed on the first occasion. You know, you walk Griffin Park was a great stadium, and I loved it with the fans and have many happy memories. That first game, they're not sure who you are. Who's this guy being named as our manager? You're standing there, they're right behind you. You hear a few comments. You know, we won 1-0 late on, and you hear a few derogatory. I won't repeat the exact words, but you get the win, and then we're on a really good run. I think we were unbeaten for 18 odd games or something, but we did really well. We were lucky. We had a good squad. You know, the likes of James Tarkowski now Premier League, and Hotter Premier League, and Andre Gay Premier League, and Harley Dean, Dave Button, Jay Bidwell, you know, Pritchard from Tottenham. These type of players. Johnny Douglas was outstanding. But Mr. Stuart Dallas, who's now at Leeds. Yeah. You know, we got Steve for 5,000 for Northern Ireland. You know, a fantastic lad, fantastic player now. But we had a really good squad. Tony Craig, if I've missed anyone out, I don't mean to. Mozo de Bayou, who was an outstanding right back. So we got promoted with Wolves, and we came up and we were immediate favourites for relegation. We had the third smallest budget. Everyone said, can you just survive? And that was like, that to me was like a red rag to bull. How do you say to someone, Amy, just do enough? Survive is just do enough. So we said, really, yeah, we just, you know, just doing it. If you have 51 points, you'll be okay. That can't be the right message. So we put in place a really aggressive bonus system, financial system for the players. And we surprised everyone. We played with a freedom. You know, we were second to Bournemouth for a long period. And then we got into the playoffs. You know, we came fifth in the playoffs. And for Brentford and those players, they deserve enormous credit for what they achieved.
Talk about everyone sort of writes you off. You come up straight away, you're that promoted side, so of course you're going to go right back down. Did you have the belief, though, that you could, you know, get to the playoffs and possibly even make that promotion to the Premier League?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as Matthew Benham, I learned so much from Matthew. I hope I gave some back, but I learned so much from him. And he said the markets always underestimate the promoted teams and overestimate the relegated teams. Now, you've got relegated teams come down and dealing with disappointment, pay cuts, job losses, staff reductions. You've got promoted teams who are used to winning, have a unity, probably getting the pay rises, new staff, staying at better hotels, etc. And they've got a real togetherness. So I knew we had a good team. I knew they're going to develop. I knew the likes of Tarkowski and Harley Dean, Tony Gray, these boys would get better. David Button in goal. Andre Gray was going to get better. Scott Hogan, who's now at Birmingham, had some terrible injuries, but, again, really talented boy. We had a good squad. We could go toe-to-toe with anyone in the division, and they really underestimated us. And by the time they realised we were a good team, probably Christmas, it was too late. We were in a really good position. So got into playoffs, and the only time we let ourselves down, and I shoulder responsibility for this one, was when we played Middlesbrough in the playoffs, because for the first time the boys realised they were within touching distance of the Premier League, and that suddenly they overthought it. We were playing with a freedom and a really keen spirit, just going to enjoy the game, and teams couldn't live with us at times. At the moment they thought too hard, then the reality kicked in, and as I say, we let ourselves down against Middlesbrough, but I've got shoulder responsibility for that. You
kept that tight-knit squad, and you've pretty much just rattled them all off there. That speaks volumes as well. So how did it feel knowing that they're coming to the end at Brentford? Because it is a tight-knit squad, and you've built something really special, the way that you've brought them all through, and then it sort of all doesn't really end the way that you want it to.
No, and it's, I've been very honest. I've always been very respectful to Matthew Benham, the owner. Because don't forget, Amy, they write the checks. Yeah. Whatever people say about, this owner's that and that owner's, they write the checks to keep the clubs going. So Matthew wanted to bring in a number of foreign players in January when we were in the playoff places. And I've got nothing against foreign players, but I didn't want to upset the dressing room at that time. Do it in the summer when you can set them in pre-season. So I was very much against it. It's his club. And I never forget, we saw David Weir and I. David's a fantastic guy, obviously a great player, but a top-class individual. And David and I were in the office Sunday morning, and David read, what's this? Rayo Vallecano coach turns down Brentford approach. And he's gone, what's that? But Matthew's very blunt, he can't lie. So I said, Matthew, I'm reading something here. Do we need to have a conversation? And he said, yeah, we need a chat. And that was it. So basically, we agreed that I said, do you want me to stay on or go now? He said, would you mind staying on? And I stayed on. And that was it. So it was a bizarre situation. Gets out in the press. I've no idea to this day. Matthew and I had some bad feeling for a little while because he thought I did it. I thought he did it. I promise you I never did. And of course, it was common knowledge. And he had a bizarre situation. We're riding high in the playoff places. We're playing Watford the following day. And this news breaks. So you can imagine the environment or the atmosphere. And I've got footage on my PC. It's a very nice piece for me. I'll always hopefully keep, where Dave Bunton punts a ball long and Andre Gray outstrips Craig Cathcart and smashes a ball in the roof of the net. And I had no idea what he was going to do, Amy. He ran round behind the goal, all the way down the touchline, and all the players ran with him, and they just jumped on us, which was great for me. And I was like, oh, one of these emotional type moments. But what he didn't realise was he's a unit. So he jumped on my back along with the 8 other players. If I didn't have a dodgy knee before, I did have afterwards. So they all jumped on my back. I was trying to keep a balance, but it was a great unity. It was a great togetherness. And, as I say, I'll always look back at those times with, fond memories, because you really learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about the players, how they learn. And I took that forward, hopefully, to use it wisely in future years.
Well, you certainly did. So when did the Rangers, the rumours of Rangers possibly come around that they were interested in you?
Very lucky to have David Weir. Obviously David's association with Rangers, Amy, is, on their Hall of Fame board, an outstanding captain in the UEFA Cup, and what a player. And because you have a good CV from Brentford, and because of the press that was associated with what happened, I was very lucky. I had 4 or 5 big offers, big clubs asked me to come in. And David Weir said, you need to speak to Rangers. And I knew Rangers as a European force when I was a kid. Listened to radio, European nights, Red Star, Belgrade, and these type of names are familiar, and Rangers. And then he said, speak to them. And I said, of course, you never not speak to them. And I had a meeting with 2 people, John Gilligan, I think it was, the gentleman. I really liked John, and a couple of the guys came down to us. And then we went back up and met them again for the second time. And it was you could tell what the club was. It had been through some very tough times, was going through a tough time, but you knew the size of the club. And the more Davy Weir and his passion, the more they spoke, the more I did my homework. And I came home, and this is, again, sounds a very, nostalgic story, but I came home, my son was older. So my son was, whatever he was then at the time, 20 odd. And he said to me, Dad, look at this YouTube clip. And it was Penny Arcade, Rangers versus Celtic, Old Firm Day. And he put it up on YouTube, put it at the volume, Amy, put it on the speakers. And he went, how can you turn this club down? And that was it. I said to Jack, I was 2 minutes in, I went, Jack, to manage this club, what a privilege. And we made a phone call there. So that's exactly how it happened. It was me doing my due diligence, but I saw that clip on YouTube, and to this day, your hairs in the back of your neck go up because it's a magnificent football arena. And to be manager there, I was just privileged, really privileged.
It is an institution, and obviously, like you say, having Davy Weir as your right-hand man does help. But was there ever, like you say, it was a tough time. The club's obviously not where it should be, or did that help along the way? You knew exactly what your goal was. It was simply promotion. It
was non-negotiable. They were the words. Promotion to the Premier League is non-negotiable. Day one, we had 9 players. The chairman had released 13 with much, media coverage. And we walked into that first day at the training ground, Ockenhowie, with 9 players. And we took a young guy who they told me wasn't good enough. He'd been out on loan, I think, to Wraith, maybe. A guy called Barry Mackay, who turned out to be one of the stars of the team. Within 10 minutes, you could see what he possessed. So Barry came in, and we quickly had to move with players that we'd liked in England, and we thought we could access for very little money. So Martin Waghorn and James Tavernier came in for, I think, less than £250,000 combined. We've got, people like Andy Halliday on a free, Danny Wilson on a free, Jason Holt for 60,000, Rob Kiernan for cheap money from Birmingham, wanted to sign him, all over. And then, of course, the 2 rocks that I had were Lee Wallace and Kenny Miller. So I cannot speak highly enough. I can speak for hours about those 2 top-class professionals. Wes Fodringham, we got from, from Swindon, 170-odd league appearances. So we were getting a team together. But we had to very, very quickly implement a style of play. But I'm thinking this crowd at iBox, David Weir said to me, 0-0 at half-time, they'll boo you off. They'll cheer you back on again, but they'll boo you off at half-time. So I thought, well, it's a 50,000 crowd, magnificent support. We've got to play in a way, Amy, that they enjoy watching their team play. And that was always going to be our focus. Can we replicate Brentford's style of play with the players and drill it into them over a really short period of time? And thankfully, the players were so receptive. They worked so hard. And we had that year where we won the Petrofac Training Cup. Obviously, we won the league with double figures in terms of point gaps. And obviously beat Celtic in the semi-final, got the Scottish Cup final. And at the last, right at the death, no excuses. We were just out on our feet. We had 14 fit players. It was probably a bridge too far. But you've got to say, for the first season, we were very, very pleased.
Talking about, you did have to think on your feet and move fast, getting all these youngsters in. Was there that fear that you're having, Andy Halliday, he's going to get it. Barry Mackay even gets it from being up here. But you're bringing in guys like Rob Kiernan, who they're coming into, it is a cauldron in Glasgow, and especially that was that intensity of the promotion. Was there a fear in that, or is that where you lean on your Lee Wallace's, Kenny Miller and Davy Weir, of course?
Absolutely right. We lean on those players. The young Don Ball, who's with me now at QPR, did exceptionally well. But again, 19 odd at the time, 20 at the time. Young Gideon Zalalem, 18 years old on loan from Arsenal. A very, very talented individual, but youngsters. But they absolutely embraced it, Amy. They loved it. And they were obviously mentored by watching Kenny. I can't speak high enough of them. How they conduct themselves, how they train every day, how they prepare, how to look after their bodies. Everything was geared towards performance, and the young guys got a real masterclass from those 2 guys. And as I say, I would always speak so highly of them. Davy Weir was always there. Some top class staff as well. Dave Lavery, who's still with Rangers now, the best masseur sports therapist that you can have in the business, outstanding. So we had these type of people. Jim Stewart, the goalkeeping coach, first class, top drawer. Frank McParland, who came with Davey and I from Brentford, the best recruitment man in the business. So we were very fortunate and good people around us. We worked hard. And what I'd say about Rangers is it completely absorbs you 24/7. My plans were to come home after certain home games, fly home, see the family, go back Sunday night. I wasn't getting home for 6-7 weeks at a time because you are completely absorbed by the club. You're doing a presentation on a Sunday afternoon for so-and-so Loyal or whatever the club may be, a media piece. And it was just a magnificent club. And every time you're there, it takes over your whole life. And look back, just the only word I can use is privileged.
It is a privilege. And you touched upon, obviously, so that first season, it was just all about promotion. But you do get that Scottish Cup run, obviously, then Celtic comes out the hat. What's that sort of like? Because obviously, like you say, you're in the Championship, you think, right, maybe don't need to face him for at least one season. What's that like?
It was, what I loved was the reaction by the players. So when the draw was made, you look around and there's any trepidation, hesitation, any nervous, all you saw was absolute excitement and delight. And that never changed right the way through to the night before at Mar Hall, staying there. And I'm looking around for the boys, who's going to crumble a little bit, who might be nervous. They couldn't wait for kickoff. They could not wait. And I remember the journey to the stadium. When you go on the coach, you obviously come in the blue side, and the fans, as you got nearer the stadium, Frank McParland had spent 20 years with Liverpool. I mean, all the European nights, the great nights at Anfield. And he's on the coach and he's gone, good grief. And as you're getting closer to the ground, it's going from 2 deep on either side to 4 deep to 6 deep to 10 deep, all the way through. And it was an atmosphere. And I'm watching the boys again, how they're going to deal with it. They couldn't wait. They could not wait for kickoff. And we were the better team on the day. And 9 times out of 10, we're going to lose that game because Celtic had, without being rude to my players, they had better established international players. But we performed with a bravery, and the game had everything. We go 1 up through Kenny Miller. They equalise after half time. Barry Mackay scores a screamer in extra time, etc. And they equalise and they hit the bar. And it had everything. Patrick Roberts missed from 5 yards out. Then we got the penalties and the shootout. So it had everything in the game. But the boys just loved it. And that, for me, was one of the most, will always be most memorable days of my career because of what it meant to the blue side of Glasgow. I was well aware of that after what the fans have been through and how the players responded and the performance they gave the fans. Everything came together, Amy.
Do you think it helped almost then when you were promoted that you had that insight, right? This group of players, they are up for it and they can do it?
No, it didn't help at all.
No?
I'll tell you why. Because the expectation levels rose. Now, I just said to you very, very respectfully to my players, I'll always defend my players, but Lee will tell you 9 times out of 10, when they've got their, Rogic, Bitton, Brown, Armstrong, McGregor, Simovic, you name it, all over the park, they had established Tierney, they had established Sinclair, then they had established internationals. And we were sitting there, and I know that we were nowhere near it. The wage disparity was too wide, the budget disparity was too big. We knew we weren't ready for there. And what we wanted was to just cement a place in the Premier League and keep building a squad. And the message was from the board was promotion in year 3. Sorry, not promotion. European football in year 3 is non-negotiable. Right. And that was absolutely right. If we couldn't get into the top 2-3 in SPFL by year 3, we deserved to be gone. Simple as that. What the board did not allow for was Brendan coming in, taking a team of international players and Dembele's and Sinclair's, etc., and having their best year in their history. No one allowed for that. So we're second in the table, 20 points behind Celtic, and you get sacked. And that's the nature. And what really frustrates me, even talking about it, was the panic that set in with the gap. We didn't look at the fact that they're having their record year, the situations, the budgets. There was just panic, and that was my, to lose your job at a club like that is, so disheartening, so frustrating, so annoying, anger, all these various emotions, Amy, because, as I say, to be there is a privilege. And when that's curtailed and cut short, it hurts you, trust me.
I see. The success that Brendan Rodgers brought, especially in that first season, as you say, it's never been replicated, and there's a reason why that's never been replicated, because it is a one-off, and I certainly don't think I'll see it again. Looking at things nowadays, you certainly don't see that. So in that summer, though, building for the Premier League or the Premiership, what was the reasoning behind you? You're breaking that mould. You look in the season before and you're bringing in your Don Balls and your Barry Mackays, then you're turning to Joey Bartons and Philippe Senderos. That's a little bit of a shake-up, isn't it?
It is, but don't forget, first of all, the one money side there, so Nico Cranchar, 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
3, and I read Nico's on 25 grand a week, and it's ridiculous nonsense. Divide that by X and fractions of that. You know, another 3. Clint Hill, free. Philippe Sendos, free. You know, but what I looked at, I thought when I saw that expectation, we had to have some men in the team to deal with Scott Brown and McGregor's and all these, you know, these players. And I thought I went against probably my principles, but I thought it was the right thing to do. Looking back now, I should have been true to my principles. But I just thought that we needed to, because of the expectation in Glasgow. What I find is that you could be misquoted so quickly in the Goldfish Bowl. And the media education curve is so steep when you're up there, Amy, because whatever you say can be twisted. So if you turn around and say, look, we're not ready to win it yet, Warburton lacks ambition. You know, if you then say, we're in a good position, I hope we can build and let's see where it takes us. Warburton says we're going to win the title. I never said that. But everything is, you know, is misquoted. And that's the beautiful nature of football in Glasgow. But you've got to be so careful. And I knew the expectation would be so high. And that was reinforced. I've said many old story now, but that first game at Hamilton, I walked in the morning, 9 in the morning. I'm in the office, I'm on my own, a little bit of calm before the storm. And I walk out to this magnificent stadium and I see going for 55 all around the stadium. And Amy, my heart sank because I knew that would literally like the blue touch paper. And what I wanted was Rangers back where we belong. You know, Rangers back in, whatever they wanted to put in, anything of that nature. Don't put there, because immediately the fans are singing and dancing. We drew in a drab performance, which was really always going to come in terms of the build up to the day. And we got caned in the papers for the performance. And then you know. And one word of advice I've been given, when I landed in Glasgow in year 1, a reporter who's still a good friend said to me, there's always been a good cop and a bad cop in Glasgow. Right now, Ronnie Dyler's a bad cop. He said, you're the good cop. Whatever you do this year, don't ever worry about it. And I looked at him and what's this guy talking about? He was so right, Amy. You know, we could nick a late goal at Kilmarnock after a horrible performance, and they'll say, Rangers stride forward again, stunning victory at Kilmarnock. The following year, we'd do that, and you get caned. Shocking performance, you know, Kilmarnock hard done by after Rangers sneak late, undeserved equaliser. It was, everything had changed. Brendan came in, it was his turn to be the good cop. And then you saw after I'd left and Stephen came in, suddenly Brendan's a bad cop. And it's that nature of the Scottish media which makes it so good for the neutral. But when you're in it, it can be challenging beyond belief.
It is challenging beyond belief. And obviously we will touch upon it. What was the relationship, and obviously the media jump on and hound on it as well? Like you say, we've touched Joey Barton.
It was obviously what happened. I've kept private because it should stay private. But Joey was Championship Team of the Year. Burnley got promoted to the Premier League. He's a very, very talented footballer. But there's certain things that I stand for, and Joey has different views on certain things. And let's just say that what happened was, for me, unacceptable. And therefore, of course, when you have lawyers involved, you can't say anything. So the Scottish media had a field day. You know, Rangers day 9 with no comment from Warburton. Day 10, Rangers say nothing. And we were the bad cops that year. But it was a difficult situation. There's no dispute in that. I was very frustrated at what happened, because he is a good player, have no doubt. But as I say, we were making the headlines for all the wrong reasons. All I wanted to do was keep building a squad, get in second position in the table. If we finish the season in second, obviously Rangers want top, Amy. But for the first season, after what they've been through, I could turn around and go, now we can build again for year 3, European football. But what happened, obviously.
Obviously, what happened, and you do look on it, and you know, ended up that season they did finish second, and however many points behind, because as you say, though, Celtic were going through an unprecedented season, and a season that has never been replicated since. The disappointment, though, does that then come even further? You see Pedro Caixinha come in, and he's gifted all this money. That must add to it.
Yeah, and it happens so many times at so many clubs, and you'd be amazed. I've spoken to so many coaches and managers who say, why? Why does that happen? Here we are getting Clint on a free, and Nico on a free, and Philippe Sendos on a free, and just going round, you know, and then suddenly they open up the coffers, and you just wonder why that is. But it's almost like we made a mistake. Now we're going to correct it. So it's football. It's, you know, the game arouses so much emotion, so much passion. you know, solid, sound, very astute businessman can crumble at the knees when football becomes involved because of the, you know, the ties and the love of the game. So that was frustrating to see. But, you know, listen, Pedro came in. I've come into jobs after other managers, and they'll say, oh, how did he get that job? So you have to, all you can do is be very respectful, always wish the manager well, which you do, wish the club well. And if you act in the right manner, hopefully what goes around comes around.
Absolutely. And you look back on your time, you said that at Rangers it was just immense pride. Do you think, though, perhaps then you jumped into Forest too quickly straight after that?
Yeah, Brendan was a good friend. From Watford. I mean, he spoke to me and said, look, take 6 months out. But I've always been a worker, Amy. I've never been unemployed in my life. I've always worked. You know, the city was I loved it. You must think I'm absolutely crazy, but you know, you get up at 4:42. I remember it's burnt on my brain. 4:42, the alarm goes off. 5:12, the train you catch. You know, you arrive at your desk at 5:48 with a coffee in hand. Speak to Tokyo at 5:59, and the day goes on. Yeah. You know, and you know it. So I've always been used to working and being busy and pressure, and I thought to myself, I can't take 6 months out. And contrary to whatever the media said, I had 2 months at home. Someone released my phone number, so I had a torrid 2 weeks with, you know, this phone. I couldn't speak to my wife. I drove back from Scotland. I'm digressing, but I drove back from Scotland after being sacked, and I couldn't speak to my wife because every time I was getting abusive text messages on the phone. Yeah. Some were from the other side, and some was from the blue side who thought I'd walked out in the club, which would never, ever happen. So literally, I got back home. I was going to go away for 2 weeks, got a phone call, and they said, would you like to speak to Forest? And I had a meeting with the owner in London, and I started very soon after. Hindsight, yeah, you're right. Brendan was probably right. But in football, how often do you get the chance to leave a magnificent club like Rangers and manage a European two-time winner like Nottingham Forest? It's a huge club, Amy.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it's a big decision to say, no, I'll leave it, because right now you're seeing a lot of really good managers not have jobs. So it was one of those, I took the decision. Was it the wise one? Listen, hindsight's marvellous, but it is what it is. I committed to the job. The club were in a relegation fight. We kept them up. Blackburn went down. And then again, you come across an owner. The KPIs for Forest, Amy, we had 3 KPIs. Reduce the average age of the squad. It was 29. Reduce the size of the squad. We turned out there was 36 players. Bear in mind, we had 9 at Glasgow. 36 players. And get mid-table security. We were 12th. The average age was just under 22 and a bit. And there was 24 players in the squad. And we get sacked. So what other job do you hit every single, you know, KPI and get sacked? But that's football. And by this time, after what happened at Brentford and what happened in Glasgow, you just go, my God, what profession am I in? But that's football. And as you say, that time, I had longer out of the game than I wanted, because jobs don't become available. And people go, well, what happened at Brentford? What happened at Glasgow? And there's almost a stain on your CV. But, you know, you have to meet people and give them this type of conversation and tell them the truth. And hopefully, you know, your attributes can shine through, your weaknesses can be clearly laid out on the table, and then people decide accordingly.
So what attracted you to your now position at QPR? What attracted you to there?
London club. I've been away in Glasgow and commuted, been away in Nottingham, had an apartment up there. I'd worked all over, you know, Chicago, I'd worked in Carolina, I'd worked in Tokyo, Asia, Singapore. And this is a London club. Now, when I was much younger, when I was at school, before going to Leicester City, my best mate in class was a guy called Neil McClintock. And his father, Frank, I don't know if you remember Frank, Scottish.
Arsenal.
You know, Arsenal, Frank McClintock, yeah. double captain. He was then QPR captain. And he knew I loved football. And I was again, so lucky. So I went to every home game in 1976, Amy, when they came second in what is now the Premier League to Liverpool by a point. And I'm sitting there going, a team of Stanley Bowles and Jerry Francis and Don Masson and Frank, you know, and Gillard and Clement and Parks in goal and Dave Thomas. I'm reading off the team now. Yeah. And you know, and I went to see Dave. I went to see the team train because Frank knew I loved football. And Frank actually was manager at Leicester and signed me there. He got sacked before I even started at Leicester. But there's a small world of football.
Absolutely.
You know? So I was there at QPR, and I had affiliation with the club. Les Ferdinand met with me, told me about the club, and they knew about me. Spurs were in NextGen, so Les and Chris Ramsey, etc., and those guys had dealt with me over that youth tournament, and they offered me the job. So again, I'm back in London. and thoroughly enjoying it.
Absolutely, and things are going well. Things are going really well.
They are, you know, but football, the Championship, I said to go back to earlier part of our conversation, Amy, the fine margins at this level are bizarre. You know, we were playing really well before Christmas, didn't win in 10. And you're playing slightly worse after Christmas and you win 9 out of 12. You know, and it's just, we played Bristol City at home and we were magnificent. Had 27 chances, I mean 72% of the ball, lost 2-1. And then we didn't play quite so well at Ashton Gate the other week and win 2-0 comfortably. It's just the fine margins, getting you rewards, the one that goes in the net as opposed to hits the bar and comes out, the penalty that's given or not given. It's these fine margins, the randomness of the game that in the Championship is really highlighted. So we're in a good position. We beat Millwall last night 3-2. We've got a game in hand. We can go 10th with a game in hand and push on from there with 30 odd points left on the table. So what we've got to do is try and hunt them down. But if we can finish in the top 10 from where we were last year with budgets being cut, then we've had a solid season.
You're one of those guys in that privileged position. Obviously, you've got plenty of experience in the Championship and you've been up here. Now, I know you'll have been questioned on it before. How do you see where do you see and can you see Celtic, Rangers playing elsewhere and if be it the Championship?
Let me tell you a story. I mean, when you do the press conferences in Glasgow, 1 week there wasn't a lot of news. You know, I think Celtic, it might have been an international, I can't remember what it was. And I walked into the press conference and all the news are there, all the cameras are there. And the guy said, so what do you think about, will Celtic and Rangers go down south? What's your thoughts on them joining the English leagues? Oh, where did that come from? So I went, listen, who knows? I went 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, who knows? Do I think it'll happen? I think eventually it will. I think TVs will dominate because what a fantastic draw, you know, Celtic v Liverpool, Rangers v Arsenal. I said, I think it'll happen sooner or later, you know, at some time, but who knows when. And that was it. I dismissed the question. And the following day I woke up to headline, Warburton demands Doncaster to take, you know, Rangers south. You know, Warburton says Celtic Rangers must go and play in the Premier League. And I'm getting calls from my managing director saying, what have you said? I said, nothing. And literally you get an apology on page 34, you know, the tiny bottom ink at the bottom of the page. But that came out. So in my mind, I don't think that's far, not saying it's far away. I think it will happen because I think, you know, you're going to have I think at some stage, I'm not sure when, I think you'll have a European Super League. And I think, you know, you might lose the top 4, 6 clubs in the Premier League. And that is the opportunity, I think, for Rangers and Celtic to join that. I also think it'd be good for Scottish football. People think I'm nuts, but right now, you and I both know that Rangers and Celtic are going to win the league. You have to go back to Aberdeen in whatever year it was when they won it, but it's Rangers or Celtic. So in terms of healthy competition, you know, I always thought in my mind, if a TV company came in with X million a year, 10 million a year, say for the next 10 years, 100 million deal to take Rangers and Celtic, I think they could work. It's just me thinking out loud, football talk, bar talk, but I think at some stage it will happen. Who knows when? But I think it would be great for Rangers and Celtic. You look at the budgets. Now you look at the Championship, and I can't repeat names or no, but we've got clubs who have got bigger budgets in the Championship than Rangers and Celtic. Yeah. Now Rangers this year have shown their quality in Europe, some fantastic results. You know, as we speak, they've got a big game tonight, etc. But the budgets down south here dwarf them up there. So again, it'd be really intriguing to see how they get on, what they do. You know, I look at Steve Davis leaving, or Defoe leaving, or Connor Goldson was at Brighton but not playing, and you know Balogun playing. Obviously, the guys I know there I tried to sign. James Tabb I know obviously exceptionally well, but you know it's an intriguing prospect to see where they would fit in the table. Would they go straight in the Premier League? Only if that European Super League, I think, came about. If not, an opportunity opened up. If there was a financial crisis, some clubs disappeared. Again, then Amy, that might be the chance for it to happen. Am I saying it's going to happen next year? No, I'm not at all. I'm just saying I think at some stage in the future, it'll be a really enticing prospect.
Absolutely, and it will be one to keep an eye on. As you say, though, then that opens up, you start to see the other clubs in Scottish football rise up a little bit because, as you say, there is a 2-horse race up here, it really is. So you've used that knowledge and you've dipped in, and obviously it's somebody of great interest up here, and that is Lyndon Dykes, obviously, at Livingston. Do you think that there is still probably an arrogance amongst Championship clubs even that they won't dip into that Scottish league now? You've found that talent in Dykes, obviously it was on show at Livingston, but do you still feel there is that arrogance?
I think there's there's a feeling that sometimes the Scottish players don't travel well. Now, as a kid, I look back to the magnificent Scottish players, you know, Billy Bremner, Joe Jordan, all these players, Gordon McQueen. You reel them off, you know, Gordon Strachan, all these fantastic players. How dare they say they don't travel well? But then, you know, you look at some of them and they have struggled, you know. So it's a difficult move south. But I think for me, there's some tremendous talents north of the border. There really is, and I think it's now with Brexit, there's a realization that there really is I'm saying untapped. That's wrong, but a market that could be better tapped into. And I think people will realise Lyndon will come down again. Big move for him. He's had a meteoric rise over 5 years. You know, to go from playing on a beach in Australia to be Scotland's number 9 and going for World Cup, you know, Euros against Maguire, England at Wembley. But the players are there. You know, they really are. There's some talented boys, and they play with an aggression and a hunger and an enjoyment of the game. So I'm a big fan of the Scottish players, Amy, and I'm sure going forward, there'll be more Billy Gilmores coming south of the border. Mark,
you've been an absolute pleasure to talk to. You really are just one of football's good guys, and certainly a knowledgeable one at that. So all I've got left to say is thank you so much for joining me on Soccer Supernova.
No, Amy, really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.